Pepto-Bismol. Hey everyone, Aaron Lovejoy here from Miniature Monthly, and as most of you know, I am the studio painter for Flying Frog Productions. I do all of the studio work for Shadows of Brimstone, Forbidden Fortress, all that good stuff, and if you notice in the paint jobs, all of the bases are custom. I thought it'd be kind of fun to show you how I go about making the mine bases. I do a lot of this based off of the actual artwork on the tiles, but I also use quite a bit of reference material as well. Mine bases are a little bit tricky because there's no foliage at all, so you have to make things interesting without putting a bush or something on it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Oh dear God.
That's right. So as you all know, I'm the studio painter for Shadows of Brimstone, and each base is custom made for the company. So I'm going to show you how I do mine bases. Now the first thing we do is we start off by doing some research. You can look at the mine tiles from the game itself. I also looked up pictures online of real mines to see kind of what exactly they look like, and quite honestly, there's not a whole lot to them. Most things that make mines interesting are on the walls and on the ceiling, and since we just have the base, what's on the ground, I had to improvise just a little bit. A lot of times I'll add things like these minecart tracks, rocks, pebbles, stones, whatever. I also add things like this bucket. Sometimes it'll be full of sand, sometimes it will have dark stone shards in it. Lots of broken up wood on the ground. I also try to add mechanical elements like these watch bits in places just to kind of look like there's old machinery that's been derelict for years or whatever. Things like that add to the whole ambiance of the mine experience. All right, well, let's get started. For now, the only supplies you'll need is a standard sculpting tool with a spatula on one side and a knife on the other, an X-Acto knife for cutting some of the putty, some bases, and I'm using Abe's Epoxy Sculpt, the natural color, or you could use Procreate, green stuff, just use your choice of putties for this. All right, now the choice of putties here doesn't matter all that much, but I do find that Abe's Epoxy Sculpt and or Milliput seem to work best for basing application. I find that I like these putties for several reasons. The first one being it's easier to sculpt hard edges with those types of putties. If you're using green stuff or brown stuff or whatever, even Procreate, you won't get those hard edges like for the train tracks. You're just not going to get them as easily as with these two putties. Second, when these putties dry, they are rock hard. This means you can sand them, file them, do all kinds of cool stuff that you can't really do with green stuff. The third is they thin with water. And this is super important because I can put water on my finger, smooth it around, whatever I need to do. Great for filling gaps, making that super smooth. The fact that they kind of smooth out with water or thin out with water is a very good property, especially when doing bases. Number 4, Abe's Epoxy Sculpt is one of the cheapest putties out there. I use it by the pound. So I get mine in 4-pound buckets. It's about $40, which seems like a lot, but man, that will last you a long, long time. If your bases have the little part where the sprue went in, make sure to get that off. This is a good time to do that because you won't forget. Now what we'll do is we'll roll up our putty. Usually make 2 small balls of it. That way I can tell if they're the same size. Roughly, yes. And then I just sort of knead them together. Folding them over on top of each other is a great way to get it mixed up real quick. Epoxy Sculpt is unique. In one way, it's sort of like Milliput, where it thins with water, which is a nice feature for it because you can get it super smooth. It's great for gap filling, stuff like that. Now what we're going to do is make our minecart tracks, and to do this, I'm going to take a little bit of this putty. I always put it on my thumb. It's a great place to hold it and kind of chop off stuff. Just don't forget it there. I've actually gone out running errands with a chunk of putty dried on my thumb. Looks like a big booger, and basically what we'll do is we'll just roll it out into a rope. Be careful as it gets longer. It has a tendency to flail around. So just roll it very slowly. Try to keep it about an even size if you can. Luckily, this is an old derelict mine, so probably the chances of these tracks being kind of jacked up and uneven is pretty good. But still, even still, you want to keep it fairly. You want to keep a fairly even rope of putty. Then I just get the idea of where I want my tracks to be. So the trick here is we're going to have to let this putty dry completely before we go to the next step. So I like to do several bases at once. You also notice that rolling out several of these tubes of putty will help you to make the diameter roughly the same on each one. This will help you keep all the tracks sort of the right size. Straight tracks are super boring. I like to make them curved, but sometimes you need a straight track. So you notice the putty is sticking to my finger as I'm trying to stick it to the base. And this is actually a good thing. It's a little bit annoying, but you want the putty to be a little bit sticky. When you first mix it up, for about the first 10 or 15 minutes, it's a little bit more sticky than after that time. And I use this time to pretty much apply my railroad tracks to all the bases at once. I need it to be a little bit sticky so that it sticks to the base. Once I've got that, then I can take my time and go back and smooth it all out. But you will find that after about 10 or 15 minutes, the putty isn't as sticky. And it's much harder to get those little tiny sausages onto the base and actually sticking to the base. So do all your work where you have to put putty on something, do it right away, right after you mix the putty, because if you don't, it's going to be much harder in the long run. What we're going to do is we're just going to flatten this rope, this sausage of putty down. And while flattening it, we're kind of pressing it onto the surface and getting it to stick. You want to be real gentle here. Sometimes I run it across the top like that, but you got to be real careful because if it sticks, sometimes it pulls the putty back up. Once the putty's stuck down there, it's on there pretty good. I'm going to take my X-Acto. Always be thinking of your base as like a photograph, and the edges of it, where the edge of the base is, that's where the photograph gets cropped. And that's kind of a cool look. You can pull it off. It's kind of a cool look because it looks like the base just stops. So once that's on, then we'll take our second roll of putty. Remember, the mine carts aren't super wide. It's not like a train track where it'd be super wide. So you don't want to make it too thin, but you don't want to make it too wide. So we'll get our second track on there, about I think where it should be. Remember, some of this will be a little bit of experimenting on your part at first to get the tracks looking just right. So don't be afraid. I mean, it's putty. It will dry after about an hour or two, but you do have some time to play around with it and work it a little bit. You can pull it back off, remake your rope if it doesn't look quite right, and replace it in a new spot. Once I got my edges cut, then I can come in, kind of coax the putty back and forth into the shape I want it. Now you're probably asking yourself, couldn't I just use some plastic card for this? And the answer is yes, you totally could, especially on straight tracks. But I like my tracks to be all different. curves and stuff like that. And sometimes I like them to be broken up, like have cracks in the tracks or whatever. And so sculpting them seems to work out better for me. All right, once I got my tracks on there, I am noticing that one track kind of goes this way and the other track goes that way. So we're going to fix that by just kind of coaxing this track, especially towards the back. I'm going to coax it over just a little bit. See how it pops back up? That's okay. We'll just push it right back down. You see I'm constantly hitting the sides with the flat side of my tool. All right, I think that track's much straighter. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. And I don't want it to be exactly perfect. Next step, I'm going to cut my tracks down just a little bit. So I'll take my knife and kind of take off a little bit of the edge. Just like that. It's thinner. The other side, and this way I can kind of clean up the edges, but I can also make the track a little bit more uniform in width. Taking care to scoop up the edges when I need to. And then we'll do it to the other side. This also teaches you to be precise with your cuts. You may fail the first few times, but eventually you start getting really good at making those cuts straight. Again, I'm using my X-Acto to cut things because it makes a sharper cut. All right, so you'll notice that I go back and forth between smoothing the edges of the railroad tracks and then smoothing the top. So I'll do the sides, do the top, do the sides again, do the top. And what this does is it keeps pushing those edges closer and closer to being a sharp edge. This is something that's really difficult with green stuff because it has a little bit more elasticity maybe. It's very hard to get those sharp edges. But with Aves Epoxy Sculpt or Milliput, the putty is soft enough to where it will start forming those hard edges. You just have to go kind of back and forth. So you also notice on curves like this, I try not to make the curve too tight, but I try not to make it too straight at the same time. It just looks better kind of with more of a curve. I know probably in reality, the track couldn't curve this quickly, but again, this isn't real. also like just having half the track being visible sometimes. It's a little bit easier just to make one side of the track. So if you're a little bit worried about not being able to get everything even, or you're having problems with that, don't stop trying, but you can do this little trick, just doing half the track and having it cropped out of the scene. So all of our boards would be this way, the other track would be on this side. All right, so every once in a while we want to add a little bit of flavor to our tracks. So maybe we put a little cut right here. And also we're going to put in a little bit of jaggedness to both sides. So it looks like it's been ripped. And then we'll use our scalpel. Come in right underneath and kind of coax it up. Make sure that sticks down. The trick to this is kind of waiting for that putty to start drying or start curing a little bit. That's why we're doing this at the very end rather than right when we first sculpted them. And what we'll do is we'll make it look like something hit from this direction and like maybe knocked up the track. There's some strange forces afoot in the mines. And if your track starts coming up, just push it back down. Sometimes do two. There. All right, so this looks a little bit wonky, but contrary to popular belief, I don't have three hands. So sometimes this is exactly how I do it. Maybe I'll stick a little blue tack under the base or something to keep it from moving around. But if you only have two hands like me, sometimes you just got to improvise. So that's our torn up track. Now you don't want to do this to every track because obviously not every minecart track will be torn up, but a few of them is good. So I recommend letting your putty dry 4 to 6 hours to get it fully cured. A lot of times I will do my putty work late at night And then that way I can finish up what I need to do, whatever needs to dry before the next step. I go to sleep, wake up the next morning, it's ready to go, and I don't really have to wait for it. Another option is if it's kind of a sunny day, it's a little bit hot, preferably not super hot, you can put the base actually outside into the sun. I leave it there about 10 minutes. That's about all I want to do because you don't want the base to start warping. If it's a really hot day, maybe you do it even less. All I want to do is get the putty a little bit warm, and this will start the curing process a little bit faster, and leave it about half an hour and it should be good to go for the next layers. It will be dry enough to sculpt more on it. So it kind of puts a supercharge into your curing time, but I would still wait 4 to 6 hours before I sand it or file it or anything like that. But if you want to kind of speed the process up, you don't want to wait, put it in the sun. I've also used a blow dryer, but the sun seems to work better. It's got those soothing rays. Next step is we got to put the wood planks between these tracks. So we just make out some more sausages, little strips of putty. And then some little strips of putty and just place them on, squeeze them down. Now the important part here is we want that plank to be lower than the track. Otherwise it looks weird. I'm going to push them real flat. Come back with our X-Acto knife, cut them off. Cut them into a smaller plank size. Let's make this plank broken. So it would have normally come right here and gone up to the track. But since something obviously hit there, I think we can tell the story a little bit better if that plank is messed up as well. So we'll cut it down a little bit. And then maybe we'll let's cut into it a little bit more. Then we I like putting a little crack between the plank and the track. I do that mainly because that's where my washes can collect down in there, and it helps differentiate between the actual piece of wood and the track itself. And we got to put in our little wood grain in. And just kind of lightly drag my blade down it. Over here, I'm going to put deeper cuts right by the edge of the wood because I think that's where it would split more. And again, drag some cuts down. We'll put maybe where nails or something would be in, bolts. Just like that. And on the part that is messed up, I think I want a little bit of 3-dimension. So cut it up like that a little bit. Like having deep cuts anywhere there's nails or anything like that. It's where the wood would split. And that's how you do the wood planks. So then we add some rocks, just like in the Sculpting Rocks video, and some sand, just like in the Sculpting Sand video. And now a word from our sponsor. I know you're probably like me, and you enjoy a little diarrhea from time to time. It comes out a lot easier. You don't have to squeeze. It just sort of falls out your butt. But when that drip, when that chocolate rain gets a little bit much and you start to feel the burn, welcome my new friend, Pepto-Bismol. Pepto-Bismol.
Wait, why are we doing this?
Pepto-Bismol tastes horrible, but works great. All right, back to our video. Pepto-Bismol. In between these, the little wood planks and the tracks, also make sure that the sand is really thin. Put in some cool little bits. These are watch bits, like a bolt type thing. All right, so this is important. When you're looking for watch parts, type in watch parts on eBay. If you get the Michaels, the store Michaels, steampunk watch parts, that's not what you want. You want actual watch parts because they're much more detailed, they're much more fine, they're fiddly, they look really, really cool. Now, do I use the Michaels steampunk watch parts? I do, but I don't use them as much as the actual watch parts. You want actual watch parts for this part. Maybe this has to do with the railroad here, or not the railroad, but the mine cart. So let's stick it in that milliput. If it pops off later, we can always come back in and glue it. In fact, let's glue it now. And a little bit of super glue to the bottom of that. And we're going to put it right there where you can see a hole. Cool. And I'm going to use one of these watch bits and put it up on this side because you can see the little gear on the inside. And maybe spin this a little bit. Let me see. Always pays to have some of these flat needle nose pliers because we can really torque this, make it good. And we'll put a little bit of super glue on the bottom of this. Now remember, these bits are really hard for a character to be standing on top of, so you want to put them in areas where the model will not be. So I'm going to put it back here. Would it look good right there or over here? I think over here. This will be the back side of the model. Squish it down into the dirt there. And so the figure can be like this or like this facing. It doesn't really matter. So basically I just add little bits like that. If I have, I save up little weapons and knives and stuff like that that I can put into the bases. Make it look a little more interesting than just a mine shaft. And that's basically how I do it. You can also add these cool little parts from train kits, model train kits. I believe this was from a Caboose braking system. And just clip off the bits, clean them up a little bit, and place them in the Milliput. And that will add some further detail to these bases. This piece right here is a little piston, and it's got this little faucet thing on the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off right about here with this razor saw, and place it on one of the bases. So it looks like a little oiling canister or something that would be down in the mines. Notice that I'm pushing the part down into the Milliput. This makes it so that the part is in the sand, not on the sand. And once dry, the Milliput sticks that part down in there really, really good. It's almost like using super glue. And then for the added last little bit of maybe realism or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to put some of this glue on here. It's regular. Just some regular Elmer's glue, and put it in just a couple spots. Grab a little of this gravel and sprinkle it on. We don't want to put this everywhere, just in a couple spots, and then take your spatula and push it down into the Milliput. It's important that the Milliput's still wet at this point. Just a couple little bits there. Make sure that you thin out your Elmer's glue also, because it will mess up your texture that you stamped in there. Once all of the putty is dry, we're going to mix up a very, very thinned down version of the Elmer's glue and cover up all of our gravel and make sure that it's really cemented on there. We want that Elmer's glue very thin though, because we don't want to cover up any of the detail that we've already sculpted in. So put it on thin and you should be good to go. All right, that's it for sculpting our mine bases. As you can see, if you kind of break it down into simpler forms, it'll be fairly quick, fairly easy. It just takes some practice on your part. So let me see all of you practicing and upping your basing game. All right, so what did we learn today? Number 1, the best putty in my opinion for bases is Abe's Epoxy Sculpt, the natural color, and Milliput Standard. Number 2, once again we learn the importance of reference photos for your project. Number 3, going back and forth from the sides to the top really did help us get those nice cornered edges on the railroad tracks themselves. Number 4, Abe's Epoxy Sculpt and Milliput can both be thin with water, making them highly versatile for this project. Number 5, adding little things like broken mine tracks can really enhance the overall look of the bases. Number 6, if you don't have time to wait overnight for your Milliput or Epoxy Sculpt to dry, put it out in the sun for 5 or 10 minutes, then just let it set for another half an hour and it should be good to go. Number 7, Pepto-Bismol makes the chocolate rain go away. Number 8, adding steampunk watch parts and even plastic train parts can really enhance that whole mine feel. Number 9, adding a little extra gravel to your sculpted sand really does give a realistic feel to the mine bases. Alright gang, once again I just wanted to say thank you for supporting us here at Miniature Monthly. Thank you for watching our videos, and thank you for working hard and getting better at painting. Yeah, be on the lookout for Miniature Monthly crew coming to a city near you. We have boot camps in Canada and Alabama. Next year we have Las Vegas Open, super dope classes there, as well as at Adepticon we'll be doing classes, we'll be hanging out, maybe entering some stuff in the Golden Demons. If you see us there, be sure to stop us, say hi, we'd love to meet you and answer any questions you might have. Also head on over to www.miniaturemonthly.com and check out boot camp opportunities, weekend workshops in a city near you. Alright, until next time, bam, go paint something.